The Supreme Court of the United States just told the most powerful man on earth, no, not a lower court, not a federal judge in a swing state, the highest court in the land. 6 justices, including 2 that Donald Trump himself put on that bench. And the word they used was not overreached. The word they used was illegal. $175 billion collected from American businesses, American families, American consumers. Every single dollar of it, illegal. And what did Donald Trump do the moment that ruling landed? He called his own Supreme Court justices unpatriotic. He called them disloyal to the Constitution. He said he was ashamed of them. And then, before the ink on the ruling was even dry, he signed brand new tariffs under a completely different law. Same tariffs, new label, different law. And as of this morning, 24 states have now sued him again. Stay with me, because what is happening right now is not a trade story. It is not an economic story. What is happening right now is a president who has been told by every court in America 3 times that what he is doing is illegal, and who keeps doing it anyway. And the question that every American needs to answer for themselves is this: what happens to a democracy when a president decides the law doesn't apply to him? To understand why this ruling is so historic, you need to understand what Trump actually did and how far outside the boundaries of American law he went to do it. When Trump took office in January 2025, he had one signature economic promise: tariffs. He said tariffs would bring factories back to America. He said tariffs would make other countries pay. He said tariffs would make America rich again. And he moved fast. On April 2nd, 2025, a date he called Liberation Day, Trump signed executive orders imposing tariffs on virtually every country on Earth. Not 5%, not 10%. Some countries hit with 34%, 41%, up to 145% on Chinese goods. The largest tariff wall America had erected since the Great Depression. But here was the problem. The U.S. Constitution is crystal clear. The power to impose taxes belongs to Congress, not the president. Article 1. It doesn't get more foundational than that. So how did Trump do it? He used a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEPA, a law designed for wartime sanctions against adversaries like Iran and North Korea, a law that had never once in its 48-year history been used to impose tariffs. Not by Reagan, not by Bush, not by Obama, not by any president, ever. Trump's lawyers argued IEPA gave him unlimited tariff power. Any country, any rate, any time, for as long as he wanted, as long as he called it an emergency. 3 courts said no. The U.S. Court of International Trade said no. The U.S. Court of Appeals said no. And on February 20th, 2026, the Supreme Court of the United States, in a 6-3 decision written by Chief Justice John Roberts, said no. The ruling invalidated Trump's country-by-country reciprocal tariffs, ranging from 34% on China to 10% for the rest of the world, and the 25% tariffs on goods from Canada and Mexico. Chief Justice Roberts was joined not only by the 3 liberal justices, but by 2 of Trump's own appointees, Justices Neil Gorsuch and Amy Coney Barrett. This was not a liberal court stopping a conservative president. This was the American constitutional system saying, no president, not this one, not any future one, gets to tax 330 million Americans without Congress. Now here are the receipts. And every single number I am about to give you affects your life directly. The Supreme Court ruled that more than $175 billion in tariffs had been illegally collected from American businesses and consumers. But here is what nobody is telling you clearly enough. That money did not come from China. It did not come from Canada. It did not come from Mexico. A Federal Reserve Bank of New York report confirmed that roughly 90% of the cost of these tariffs was borne by American consumers and importers, not by foreign exporters. The Yale Budget Lab calculated that these tariffs cost the average American household between $1,300 and $1,700 annually. You paid it. Your family paid it. Every time you bought electronics, clothing, car parts, household goods, you were paying an illegal tax that Trump imposed without Congress, without authorization, and without constitutional authority. The moment the ruling landed, Trump stood before cameras and said he was ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what was right for the country. He called his own justices unpatriotic and disloyal to the Constitution. Read that again. The President of the United States, whose duty under the Constitution is to faithfully execute the law, called two of his own Supreme Court nominees unpatriotic for enforcing the Constitution. And then came the move that stopped constitutional scholars mid-sentence. The same day the Supreme Court ruled his tariffs illegal, Trump announced brand new tariffs under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, a law designed to address gold standard currency crises that no longer exist. By the next morning, he raised them to 15%. Here is what makes this extraordinary. Trump's own Justice Department had previously argued in a court filing that Section 122 does not have any obvious application in fighting trade deficits. His own lawyers told a court this law doesn't work. Then the moment the Supreme Court killed his first set of tariffs, he used that exact law anyway. And within 13 days, 24 states filed a brand new lawsuit against him. A second lawsuit was filed on March 9, 2026, yesterday, with one line that says everything. No president has the power to tax the American people on his own. And here is the number that should stop you cold. The $175 billion in illegally collected tariff revenue sitting in the U.S. Treasury is accruing interest at a rate of $700 million per month. Every single month this money is not refunded. American taxpayers owe more interest on money that was illegally taken from them in the first place. Smash that like button right now because this next part is what every financial news channel is missing entirely. Now let me tell you exactly what this means for you. Not for Wall Street, not for economists, for you. If you are an American consumer, the Trump tariffs were the largest U.S. tax increase as a percentage of GDP since 1993. The average American household paid $1,500 more in 2026 because of these tariffs. That money came out of your grocery bill, your clothing budget, your car payment, the medication in your medicine cabinet, and it went illegally into the U.S. Treasury. If you are a small business owner, you pay tariffs on every imported component, every piece of equipment, every raw material you sourced from abroad. There are more than 330,000 U.S. importers who paid these levies. U.S. Customs and Border Protection says a new automated refund system could be ready in 45 days, but experts say the actual refund process could take years. If you are watching your retirement account, when the Supreme Court ruling landed, U.S. stock futures slipped. The Dow dropped. Gold surged 1% as investors fled to safe haven assets. Markets do not like uncertainty, and right now, United States trade policy is the single largest source of economic uncertainty on planet Earth. And here is the fiscal number that nobody in the mainstream media is connecting to your daily life. The IEEPA tariffs, had they remained in place, would have raised $1.4 trillion from 2026 through 2035. Trump built his entire budget math around that number. His tax cuts were partially funded by tariff revenue. That revenue is now gone, and the national debt is heading to $58 trillion by 2036 as a result. The tariffs that were supposed to make America rich just blew a $1 trillion hole in America's fiscal plan. And the man responsible called the judges who stopped him unpatriotic. Drop a comment right now. I want to know, did you know you were the one paying these tariffs all along? Not China, not Canada, not Mexico. You. Drop it below. I read every single one. Here is where this goes. I see three paths. And unlike most coverage you will see today, I am going to tell you which one I think is most likely, and exactly why. The first path is the legal maze. The Section 122 tariffs get struck down just like the IEEPA tariffs. Legal experts note that Section 122 has never been invoked by any president, and Trump's own Justice Department previously argued it does not apply to trade deficits. If courts strike Section 122 down, Trump is left with only narrow sector-specific tariff authorities. The global tariff wall collapses. The effective U.S. tariff rate, which was already elevated before the ruling, falls further. Relief comes. But the long-term damage to supply chains, to allied relationships, to business investment planning is already done and cannot be undone by a court ruling. The second path is the constitutional standoff. This is the scenario that legal scholars are starting to discuss in terms they have never used before. The White House has already signaled defiance, promising to rebuild tariff barriers using methods, practices, statutes, and authorities that are even stronger than before. What happens if a president simply refuses to comply with a Supreme Court ruling? The last time something approaching that threshold was reached was 1974, when the Supreme Court ordered Nixon to hand over the Watergate tapes. Nixon chose compliance. But Nixon was facing imminent impeachment. Trump's party controls Congress. The restraints that stopped Nixon may not function the same way in 2026. The third path is the midterm reckoning, and this is my prediction, and here is exactly why. Just before the Supreme Court ruled, 64% of Americans disapproved of how Trump was handling tariffs. After the ruling, 60% of Americans strongly approved of striking them down. And here is the date you need to write down right now. The new Section 122 tariffs must expire in 150 days unless Congress votes to extend them, which means Congress will be asked to vote on tariffs just months before the November 2026 midterm elections. Every Republican senator with a trade-dependent constituency will have to stand up in front of their voters and explain why they are voting to keep a 15% global tax that the American people overwhelmingly oppose, that the Supreme Court already called illegal in its previous form, and that is costing the average American household $800 a year. Watch July 2026. That is the 150-day deadline. That is when this becomes a congressional vote. That is when the political cost of this entire tariff disaster lands directly on every Republican running for re-election. And that is the moment, not today, not this week, when the real reckoning begins. Here is everything you need to know. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 on February 20th, 2026, that Trump's IEEPA tariffs were illegal. Two of his own appointees voted against him. $175 billion was illegally collected from American businesses and consumers, 90% of it paid by Americans, not foreign countries. Trump immediately signed new tariffs under Section 122, a law his own lawyers previously said does not apply. 24 states sued him within 13 days. A new lawsuit was filed yesterday, March 9, 2026. My prediction: the Section 122 tariffs get struck down before summer. Congress faces a forced vote in July. The tariff wall collapses not with a court ruling, but with a midterm election where every American who paid $1,500 in illegal taxes shows up to the ballot box. The question I want you to answer in the comments right now: if the government illegally collected $175 billion from American families, do you think you will ever see that money refunded? Yes or no? Drop it below. I read every single one. If this analysis gave you something that number 30-second headline could, subscribe right now. Because the next chapter of this story is already being written in courtrooms across America. And when it breaks, you will want to have been here from the beginning.